So all it remains is to introduce Mike. Mike Brookes is a keen amateur yachtsman who's on the way by cargo ship next week from Grenada down to Trinidad to take possession of his new acquisition, which he bought at the start of lockdown, which I'm sure he'll be telling us a bit about, but his new boat, which is, I think, designed for more expedition type sailing. But tonight isn't about Mike's amateur sailing exploits, it's about a skippered trip that he took part in. He was the skipper of, and it's about a voyage taking rookies from the distilleries of Scotland to the Faroe Islands and onto the north of Norway, fueled by some of Scotland's finest malts, I believe, or at least the rookies were. Mike denies it. Mike, over to you.
Thanks very much, Simon. Hi to all, ladies and gents. Really nice for you to join us tonight. And thanks to everyone who's sent me a good luck message for tonight's presentation, especially those who are missing EastEnders for tonight's show. So hopefully it's a good one for you, so that you feel missing EastEnders was worth it. So a quick bit about me. About 5 years ago, I joined the OCC when I'd first sailed to the Caribbean from Europe on a little westerly pentland that I bought in Greece and ended up sailing all the way to Panama, teaching sailing and diving along the way. While the boat was in Panama, I decided I needed to return to Northern Europe for a bit more reality. And as I teach up to Yachtmaster Ocean for the RYA, I decided to teach for a company sailing out of Scotland all the way up to Norway. This presentation is actually about 3 trips. The first one is the Western Islands in Scotland, which, as Sam described, was a trip to the distilleries, we'll call it, of Scotland from Oban. Then we move on to stage 2, Scotland to Norway by the Faroe Islands, and stage 3 is Buda to Tromsø via Lofoten. So stage 1, the whiskey tour, as we'll call it. As you can see from the chart on the right, we were out of Oban and then made our way south all the way down to Islay, started again north, and it was a trip from the 29th of April to the 10th of May 2018. I was on board a Clipper 60 called Blue Jay, which was the ex-Meramus and Jersey from the Clipper race in 1996, the inaugural one, and then the 3 after. So she's done 4 circumnavigations, so 3 podium finishes, and she got a draft of 2.2 meters. So a good thoroughbred sailing boat. As all good stories start, this one starts in the pub. So anyone who's going up to Oban, and certainly anyone who's sailing up there, you need to get in touch with the port officer for Oban, Bob, and you really, really get a brilliant chance to have a sit down and a chat with Bob about his sailing exploits, which are absolutely amazing, in the wake of Tillman, and also about his, he's probably going to shout at me for the sycophantic plug, but also about his really amazing work he's done for the youth and people who are a bit less fortunate. So it's really a special chance to, if you're sailing out of Oban, to have a good call to the port officer for Oban, Rob. So Oban, we've got Oban here with Carrera in the background, and our trip actually started from Carrera, but we brought the boat over to Oban to make sure we could get on the crew nice and easily with all the gear. And this is our crew for that trip. So a bit of a varied bunch, with one thing in common: they like whiskey. Our first trip was set off from Oban down the Firth of Lorne to Seal, or Pull Dobrain, the anchorage at Pull Dobrain. And as all sail training trips start, good nice tacking and jibing exercise down through the Firth of Lorne, and then come into the anchorage at Pull Dobrain, which is, it's pretty spectacular for a first anchorage. I just returned from 3 years in the tropics, so you know, being back in the UK, it was really a nice change. The reason we went down to Pull Dobrain, apart from it being a really, really nice anchorage, is the Tegan Trish. So sail is the most eastern of the Western Islands, and it's separated by a little tiny humpback bridge to the mainland. And the story goes that in the Jacobite Rebellion, or at the end of the Jacobite Rebellion, in the 1745, I believe it was, the wearing of kilts was banned on the mainland. You could still wear them on the island, but you couldn't wear them on the mainland. So the Tegan Thrush is essentially the house of trousers, and it is where the local clansmen used to change into trousers before they hopped over the bridge onto the mainland. How much of that is true, we don't know, but it's a good story. Unfortunately, after the hike over the island, as you can see, it was closed for refurbishment. So although we went to a brilliant anchorage first, I don't think I was flavour of the month. As we continue down from there, we come down from Sale and have a really, really beautiful sail down the back end of Jura. And it really, really was a spectacular, nice sail. Even though it was early in the season, April, the weather was fantastic. And yeah, I mean, overcast, it is still spring, but still really, really good. We had a resident American on board with us who was amazed with our love of tea. So yeah, consequently, every day at 10 o'clock when we're having a cup of tea, he was amazed at the regularity that we could drink it. Again, coming down the back end of Jura, we come across a nice pilot cutter under full press. And it was very fitting after having spent the previous evening with Bob, seeing a Tillman-esque boat coming up through the Sound was really, really spectacular. As we come around into Craighouse, which is the main port in Jura, we've got the Pips of Jura over onto the left, and this is the old quay. The anchorage at Jura is, or at Craighouse, is, yeah, it's not so bad, but it's not a fantastic holding ground. So plenty of scope and you'll be okay. But the main reason to go into Jura is our first distillery. And so the guys, the next day after the sail down, it was about a 6-hour sail down. The guys have a day off and go to the whiskey distillery, which seems like they enjoyed it. It was good fun. The next set of distilleries on our list were on the southern end of Islay. So we have Lagavulin, Ardbeg, and Lafrague on the southern edge of Islay. And again, there's twofold reasons for it to sail down. One is the distillery tour, but as it's also a sail training trip, we get the guys to plan the passages and run the passages. We just sort of sit back and observe, make sure everything's going okay, do the sail set, encourage them with sail setting and teach along the way. So it's always fun when people have come into a boat that is cruising at around about 10 knots on a broad reach, quite happily at 10 knots as well, not even being pressed. So things tend to come up a lot quicker than they'd expect. So if we look down here on our little plan, we see something really strange. And about halfway, I realized the guys didn't think they were actually sailing past Islay. I think they still thought they were sailing past the bottom of Jura. I sort of said to them, what's that in front of us? What do we think it is? Islay is the answer. Actually, it's Northern Ireland. So I let it run a bit longer than I perhaps should have, but still. As we were sailing down, it was a pretty heavy day, but the boat handles it well. As you can see, it was a struggle to get around inside. We had a nice finish though once we were inside the bottom lee of Islay, and a really nice evening sailing. While the guys went off to the distillery tour, I remained on board and did some maintenance. And at the same time, a sailing school from Northern Ireland came across on their first inaugural sail in their Sweden 42. And they got piped in by a piper from the distillery. And there was also a barbecue of scallops, which is very traditional for the islands. Unfortunately, I don't have a photo of it, to my utter dismay, but it was really quite special. Again, we're in small islands in Scotland, and the people are lovely. The islands are beautiful, but the people are very, very nice. the trip to the distillery or the 3 distilleries, so you can imagine the state the guys got back in, and we headed around to Gear. Gear, this is a stock photo, I must point out it is not my photo. I didn't have a drone with us, but this gives a real good impression of Gear. And it really was like this when we turned up, even though it was the beginning of May. And yeah, it's a really, really beautiful island. Unfortunately, no distillery, but we got to go ashore to the hotel and have a beer and have dinner ashore actually as well. But it being a bit of a hippie island, there is a music festival here once a year in summer. You get the chance to either stay in a yurt or you can camp. And there's a really nice cairn with a lot of people's old boat names thrown in and painted on. So again, a really, really beautiful island. Coming up from Gear, we made our way up to Crinan for our return leg of this little small Western Isles cruise. And coming into Crinan, it's the start of the Crinan Canal. So you end up coming in through a set of locks and then get the choice to stay in the basin alongside. We go to the pub on the Crinan Hotel, and yeah, another really good stop if you're in that end of Scotland. Everyone looks quite happy. That must be good. While we were in Crinan, the oldest passenger steamship still working and still taking passengers was getting repaired just in the next dockyard, and it actually sails out of the harbour at Crinan and does trips around the Western Isles. You can see the masts over on the right, which are the masts of the boat that are laying up the canal, waiting to either lock out or lock in. And although it's probably normal for most of you that live in the UK, it's May, and yeah, these are the tow paths around the Crinan Canal, and you get a really nice walk along them. The bluebells out in May. We were heading out to Jura. No, that's a lie. Sorry, we were heading out to Iona to go to Tinker's Hole the next morning, and we were going through the Corriviacan, which is here, and out we were heading towards Jura when we noticed engine problems. So we decided to make a nice long sail of it back to Oban to make sure we could get what we needed to done repaired. So we're going through the Corriviacan. It's a tidal race. It's a really heavy tidal race. So unless you are on the tide, you are very unlikely to be getting through it nice and easily. So we set out and locked out the next morning, and yeah, headed off towards the Corriviacan, and made it through no problem. Really, really spectacular for the guys. And as I say, that's when we decided we needed to return to Oban pretty sharpish. So we sailed back up through Lunga and got catapulted up with the next tide going up, which is why we returned to Oban and not Crinan or Cruve. So you can see the upwellings from these tidal races that you get in this end of Scotland, and they are pretty heavy. We had a really nice sail up into Oban. This is Carrera to the west. And the next day, the guys had the day off while we did some engine repairs. On board, we had 3, I'd say, die-hard Liverpool fans. I wasn't one of them, for those who can tell my accent. I've got more taste, I support Everton. Exactly. So I'm not a football fan. And the next day was the Championship League final, sorry, the European Championship League final with Barcelona. So any of them that do remember the game will realise it was one worth to go to. And the crew were pretty insistent we were going somewhere that they could go ashore and watch the game. And rather than spend another day in Oban, where we knew we could watch it, we knew of a pub in Tobermory that I'd have it on. So we set off again across the Forth of the Lawn and up the mull of the Sound of Mull, sorry. So this is Ladies Rock coming across the Forth of the Lawn. And then we had a really nice downwind sail up the Sound of Mull. That's Kieran Hood. I don't know if any of you know of him, really excellent sailor, and with one of our clients on the helm. And yeah, to give a good impression of a nice goose wing sail down. And the guys love it. It's really, really nice to get the guys sail handling a boat that is much bigger than what they'd be used to normally. And they thoroughly enjoyed it. As we went up Mull, we were also chaperoned by a set of dolphins. And yes, managed to get a nice dolphin video of a dolphin plodding along. Those of you who've been to Tobermory will probably recognise this. It's a really picturesque little town. It's small, but it's a little town. And you anchor out in the, or you either come alongside, or you couldn't come alongside because the pontoons were being repaired. But it's a really picturesque postcard type of town. So the guys went ashore to scope out the game, and I had some maintenance to do to put up a set of cup holders. And once they'd scoped out the pub where they could get the game in, they returned. And while I was washing my hands, I come back to find my cup holders filled. I actually sent this photo to the director of the company, and yeah, she was less than impressed. I got a bit of telling off, but hey, the guy's trip, it's up to them. They enjoyed it. From there, I don't know if those of you remembered the Champions League final. I say I'm not a football fan, but it was a fantastic game, and the clients had a really excellent night to shore. We all did, had a really excellent night to shore. But as we were nearing the end of their trip, we headed over to Ornesay, the anchorage at the north end of the screen, for an overnight anchorage, and then down to Loch Eileen, and then back to Oban. Ornesay, I don't have any photos from, and it wouldn't have mattered anyway because it was like pea soup. It was, we had to feel our way in, and anchored in pretty heavy fog, and it didn't really improve the next day when we left. So this was leaving Oban and coming into, feeling our way into the anchorage at Ornesay. And then next day we went down to Loch Eileen. Loch Eileen is a really fantastic anchorage. You have a small village at the bottom left of the loch, and a really beautiful picturesque walk right the way around the loch, with an old manor house at the north end with some outlying buildings, and also there's a hide there where you can hide in, yeah, screw yourself away in, and have a watch out for deer. A shameless plug, that went to Classic Boat. It didn't earn me any money, it's a shame, or even the Classic Boat magazine, terrible. But this is the anchorage on the walk around. Again, spring in Scotland, so really beautiful greenery and beautiful bluebells out. And the woods that are surrounding the loch are really fantastic. Now, these are the manor houses at the top end, with the boathouse over on the right. And yeah, really pretty thing. The following day is back to Oban, where Blue Jay, which is this one, met up with what was going to be our next boat, Oriole, which is here. The Admiralty pattern anchor that is in the foreground, I still haven't been able to identify the boat of. And despite asking as many people as I could in Oban Marina on Carrera, where this is, nobody seems to know. So still trying to find that one out. What we did also see in the Sound is the pilot cutter that we seen originally under full press behind Jura. So it found like a nice culmination. We'd seen it in the second day of our trip, and now it was there at the end as well. The clients went home after a thoroughly nice trip, and yeah, I think they all enjoyed it. No, pretty certain they all enjoyed it, they really did. And I escaped up to the chandlery of Dunstafnage for a well-earned break. So I'm not entirely sure why it's tea. Stage 2 of the trip takes us from Scotland, from Oban, up to the Faroe Islands, and then across to Hollandsfjorden, up through the Skerries, and then into Buda. It's a little later in the year, obviously. This is May. It isn't 2021, as I've just seen. It's actually 2018. And yeah, it was on board a boat called Oriole, which is a Bowman 57 cutter. They do make a ketch version of this, and I didn't know they made any cutters, but This certainly hasn't ever had a ketch. It is originally built as a cutter. It was laid down in 1983, a Holman and Pye design, displacement of 27 tons and a draft of 2.2 meters. Anyone who has a Bowman or a rival will probably tell you they do not go backwards. And that is certainly true of this boat. The engine is a center mounted engine, and it's mounted the opposite way around to normal and driven through a Borg Warner drive under the engine. So effectively the prop wash is very far from the propeller and doesn't really drag any water over the propeller initially. So trying to get it to drive backwards is a nightmare. I didn't believe the people when they told me. I go, oh yes, of course, but no, it's true. This is our crew for this trip, and they really were a fantastic bunch, a really, really nice bunch of guys, and a very varied set of people as well. We had some who retired managers from industrial plants. We had someone who was a warden for Parks Scotland. We had scientists who run labs in New York, and we had chicken farmers from the Fens down in Norfolk, and they got on really, really well. A really, really amazing group of people that I'd love to sail with as well. I'd love to sail with again. The mate for the trip is a guy called Alex Lenine. We can't see him in this photo because he's taking it. And again, we'll see a photo of him later on, but he really was a fantastic mate. And he's currently embarked on a mini transat campaign where I wouldn't be surprised to see him place very, very highly. I'd go short of saying win because I might have to eat them words, but he really is a fantastic sailor and a fantastic guy. If you ever take over a boat and the outgoing captain tells you, the generator just, it's a bit coffee and doesn't really start, and yeah, check the fuel filters. And the best bit of the best bit of the boat is when I come to the chart table, it was absolutely filled with planning material for a trip up north. And yeah, it's really a really good passion of mine to plan the trip. With the planning comes about 300 charts. So certainly my first night on board was a lot of admin in arranging the charts into the order that we needed them for the trip, and planning the trip with the pilot books and stuff available. Before the clients arrived, I also got a bit of a break to have a wander around Carrera. And this is again another beautiful island in Scotland. We've got Oban Marina in front of us. Over the back, this is Oban with the new pontoons laid in at Oban. The monument on the top, which is a really good navigational mark. And yeah, this is back out over the Firth of Lawn. The same again, just a bit further down. And some of the locals. Good Highland shaggy coo. One of the most amazing things I found as I was just wandering around was a seat just placed looking out over the Firth. And yeah, I spent a nice quiet hour sat there having a think through the trip, how it was going to go, and how best to use the skills of the people on board. So there's two boats heading up to Norway. Blue Jay, which we've just seen and I've left, was skippered by Rachel, and Oriole, which we're on at the moment, as we see the saloon on Oriole. And because it's an ex-cruising boat, it has a nice big saloon. So a lot of the time, any briefs that were being given would be on board the boat, as in on board my boat with both crews. So these are the watch leaders having a look at where we're going, with one of the watch leaders off the other boat there giving a big finger stamp to Buddha, and yeah, starting to decide on where they're going to be planning our trip up. Of course, the planning is very guided, and it's a really good teaching opportunity for the guys to teach them about offshore passage making planning, and yeah, I think it's really, really beneficial. The guys enjoy it a lot. Because we're going on an extended trip, obviously the first thing you would do on any trip is to make sure the guys all understand your man overboard procedures, and this is how we do it on also on the Clipper 60s, but on the Bowman 57 as well. So you have someone in a harness and a flapping suit and a life jacket attached to a halyard, and we lower them over the side once we've got close to the casualties in the water or whatever's gone in, and then pluck them out. The first leg I encouraged was to get the guys to anchor in Stornoway. It's about a day's trip up there. So it breaks up the trip nicely. It gives them a good first day to get to grips with the boat. But also, as there was quite heavily westerly blowing in, it also gives time to shelter in between Lewis and Harris, or behind Lewis and Harris, before the trip up to the Faroe Islands. As you can see, it's pretty overcast to set off. And again, as we're on a commercial trip, it's a trip that has to have momentum. Otherwise, the guys don't get the time in Norway, or the trip feels rushed for them. So again, good tacking and jibing exercises across the Firth of Lawn to get the guys used to sailing the boat and really being in charge of the boat. And yeah, a cup of tea. So some happy looking guys. Again, this is another watch. So from Stornoway, we set off up to Torshaven in the Faroe Islands. We let the westerly blow through, and it left us with quite a flat sea the next day, and a good bit of wind blowing in from the northwest. As we can see, we've already cleared in this photo. We've cleared the north end of Lewis. What she's got, she sails very, very well. As she started to dig a heel in, like dig a shoulder in, really setting off. The guys look impressed. To go on these trips, it's advised that you've sailed before, but it isn't necessarily a necessity. It's not. It's a 2-3 day trip up to tours up to the Falklands, no, up to the Faroe Islands, and then a trip from there over to Norway. It's around about an 800-mile trip, so it's not a huge offshore passage. But for the guys who haven't done it before, it is a big offshore passage. It's a big step. And for the guys who've never sailed before, it's a huge thing to do. As we can see, the guy in the foreground here, he was a Scottish lad and a really fantastic guy who'd never been on a boat before. So while we were in the sheltered end of the Western Isles, no problem. As soon as the boat started to dig a shoulder in and set off, he sort of plunked himself on the rail there and focused on the horizon, which always a good sign. And then he just sort of said to me very quietly, "How long is it going to be like this?" And when I replied, "Hopefully all the way," didn't look entirely impressed. But he stuck it out. We also picked up a little traveller on the way and gave our thrush a lift up to Faroe Islands as well. This is our first glimpse of the Faroe Islands 2 days later. And I think this is pretty average for how people see the Faroe Islands for the first time. The geology of the Faroe Islands and the makeup of them, they're volcanic islands of basalt that are pushed up from the mid-Atlantic ridge and then slowly migrated the way away from that ridge as the ridge has continued to spread. It's a divergent ridge. And yeah, they get the full brunt of anything coming up from the southwest. And then when the polar high is established, it's just dank. And the weather there is pretty grim all the time, like this. But they do look fantastic. They look really spectacular. And these big black basalt cliffs looming out of the greyness is pretty impressive. From there, our little bird decided it had been taken far enough and departed for its new life in the Faroe Islands. As we can see, there is a change in the constitution of our sailor who has had his first large offshore passage. There wasn't much left in his stomach, and I don't think he'd slept. But kudos to him, he never uttered a word of complaint, and tried to get involved all the time with everything he could. He really was a fantastic member of the crew. We celebrated with a good Dutch-made apple pie for the crew as a congratulations on the first offshore passage. And then we headed the pub. But of course, because everyone had been out of comms for 2 days, a whole 2 days, and conversation wasn't rife in the pub. So the Tórshavn in the Faroe Islands has the smallest parliament in the world, and rather one of the oldest parliaments in the world as well. And it's just really quaint. It's tiny. There's turf roofs on all of the houses and all of the, as we see now, this is the tinges, the ting, meaning the meeting place, not the parliament. As we come through, we've got the old battery that used to protect the Falkland Islands. And while some maintenance needed to be carried out on the boat, by me and the mate, the crew went off to see some of the sea cliffs, which are some of the largest sea cliffs in the world, with largest sea stacks in the world, which have a huge colonies of nesting seabirds on, and puffins as well. The locals here still hunt whales as well as eat seabirds and seabird eggs. And yeah, it's not unusual to see in nesting season the locals abseiling off the cliff, admittedly no longer on dodgy bits of 3-braid hemp as in the old days, to collect seabirds' eggs. The stack on the sort of centre left of the picture was climbed by a group of climbers. I forget the year. It was climbed by a group of climbers who actually camped on the top overnight. And yeah, the cliffs, the guys who went to the cliffs were really spectacular. A lot of wildlife and seabirds, and some really nice buttresses with through holes and some really nice caverns and caves. From Tórshavn, we headed up to Klaksvík, which is the second city of the Faroe Islands. And we also did a lunchtime anchorage in a little anchorage here. It was blowing about force 8 when we set off, but because you're sheltered by the islands, the fetch is very slight. And then as a sail training exercise, it's really good because you, in the sounds, where the sounds are, you get about a force 6 or a force 8 coming through. And it's relatively flat and calm. Then when you're behind the mountains, it quietens down a bit. So the guys sort of get pushed to the edge of what they're comfortable with, and then all of a sudden it quietens down again. So they get a really good experience about how to handle a boat and how to handle a boat in quite heavy conditions, which aren't prolonged. It's little short hops, hop. So they really get the feel for it. The anchorage that was chosen, the guys had chosen for lunchtime anchorage, and it seems protected. What they hadn't taken into account is that this spur here, and there's actually a mountain here. So this creates a nice saddle through here. So with a force 8 northerly coming through a saddle and over a mountain, it must have been blowing. It was blowing about 60 knots when we got in there. The cat's paws that were coming down off the side of the mountain were pretty brutal. So the guys decided a swift turnaround and head to Klaksvík was a better idea. So we had lunch on the go. Now this is coming out of Tórshavn and seeing the end of the Parliament buildings. And this is behind one of the mountains. So although it is blowing a little bit, it doesn't look like it. It's very calm sea. And we got one of the watch leaders on the right navigating us with our with her notes. It actually cleared up. And when the weather clears in the Faroes, it really is spectacular. It really shows a beautiful side of the Faroes, which it is a handful of days a year that it starts to look like this. And it also starts to bring out the geomorphology of the islands. So you start to see these banded layers on each of the mountains. And the islands are just like little mountains popped out of the sea. And these banded layers are almost equal on every mountain that you see. And the mountains are formed by lava flow coming out of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge when they were formed. And then successive glaciations have left their mark, and quite literally left their mark on the islands. These are the successive glaciations in the strata. So you have a very heavy glacial, and less and less. And as the glaciers recede, this is exactly what you get. From each successive ice age. This is Blue Jay following us into Claxvig, and there's a view out of where we are docked in Claxvig, where you can see these stratations on the mountains. Just like you see in the Lake District in the UK and like you see in Scotland, where you have ribbon valleys, you also have massive C-shaped, scooped glacial erosion in the Faroe Islands. And you can sort of see them here, where you've got a large chunk of two mountains with this huge scoop in it. And then you can see the stratations of each successive ice age on the way through. So you can really see, and see it again in this photo, you can really see how the successive glaciations have affected the land. This is Claxvig. It's an industrial town. It's a really industrial second city of, I say city, it's certainly a town. But because they still whale hunt, you see the odd statue and monument to whale hunting. This one reminded me of Whitby with the whale bones by Cook's Memorial. And they do have some pretty strange art. Because we were going on an extended offshore passage, we also teach the guys the heavy weather tactics that we'd expect to see on any offshore passage that you're going to make. So this is after we've set up the staysail and, sorry, the trysail and the storm jib on board Oriole, with Blue Jay moored outboard was in the background. Here's the mate I was talking about for the trip, Alex Lenine. This is me. And yeah, this is our last photo in Claxvig before we departed. And because we had two boats together, of course, it was going to be a race all the way to Hollands Fjord, which was likely to be our next stop in Norway. I say, I've been trying to recruit Alex to the OCC for a while, but he's engaged with his mini transat. But if you ever meet him or stumble across him, he's really a fantastic guy for a chat about sailing. So the trip over to Hollands Fjord from the Faroe Islands is around about 600 miles. So it can be classed as an offshore ocean passage for your qualification for Yachtmaster Ocean with the RWA. And that is, oh, thank you very much, Parallels. That is exactly what the trip was about for a few people. There we go. So this is us leaving Claxvig. And again, you can see the striations on the mountains in the background with Blue Jay in front of us. And this is the last time Blue Jay was in front of us. So Bowman 57, an old lady of a cruising boat, is challenged by a Clipper 60 to head up to Norway. Yeah, I think this photo really sums up Alex. Actually, he was like this for the entire trip, and he really contributed to an amazing trip for the clients. I had to zoom in a lot there to get that photo of Blue Jay. She's disappearing in the background a bit. And yeah, this is Mykonos. So as we're coming around the end of the Faroe Islands, and we are now firmly in the Norwegian Sea. From the crew, they didn't look like they had a heavy night the night before, but from the looks of them, after the first, after we dug in on the port tack and really started to set off, faces started to drop a bit. So I think the night before may have been a bit heavier than I was led to believe, but set off well. It was only for some of the crew, evidently, and seems to have had an amazing time on the helm here. And again, we've got Blue Jay in the background. Rory, after a quick chat in the Faroes, we didn't know whether he wanted to go home or not. So we had a chat about whether he wanted to fly home or how else we could get the guy home. And after he sat down and had a good think, and a good internal monologue, he really showed his true colours. He turned around and said, no, I've come on this trip, I can do this trip. And after being pretty much sick as a dog for the 2 days on the trip up to the Faroes, he looked forward to the trip, Ernest, and he really did show the true colours of someone who's happy to dig in and really challenge himself on the trip. And I think he smiles probably because we're running a bit freer here, and we're not as hard pressed as we were in the other one. But yeah, he really came. He really shown some amazing fortitude to progress with the next leg of the journey. This is our passage planning for the entrance into or landfall, as it is, at Hollandsfjord, and you can see what the coast looks like. This is, where's my mouse? Where's my mouse? There we go. This is north, so pointing towards this area is north, and these are the outlying skerries of Norway, and then we come into the fjord and we're looking at coming down to here. We've got one of our Russians planning our passage in, and I don't know what's happened to me. It looks like I've just woken up. The weather was, it was a fairly brisk sail up there. We made it in 3 days for a 600-mile passage, so we were well on it. And yeah, we settled in fairly well to a really good sail. But this is what the passage was all about. It was about getting the guys to take the sights and navigate by traditional means to get us up to Hollandsfjord. Of course, we keep a plot because we have to keep a plot that they are not aware of, but they still plan the passage. The clients still plan the passage without knowledge of our actual position. Well, it is our actual position. It's just a position they've determined from the celestial sites. So giving the guys the opportunity to, teach them how to take sites if they haven't already, if they don't already know, and teach them how to derive the position from the sites they've taken is really amazing. And watching it click, watching the guys sort of, oh wow, and when they click, it's a really, really great feeling to have taught someone how to navigate by sextant or navigate by traditional means. As we were traveling north and we're getting later into May, we started to see a really good phenomenon. The sun had set and then moved around from the northwest to the northeast in sort of this guise, and then reappear a couple of hours later in the northeast. So the guys got to experience this sort of low-lying, almost, low-lying sun just pop up again a couple of hours after it's set. Here's us making landfall with Sam on the helm, and yeah, he seems pretty happy to have made landfall, and they were bang on. The landfall was exactly where they hoped it'd be. As we can see in the sky, it's starting to turn and threaten to be a bit more than the passage we've had. So we decided to fell away the head sail because we only had about another hour to sail anyway, put the donkey on and head in towards shore before the weather turned and caught us, making it a bit of a heavier trek to get into Hollandsfjord. This is the entrance to Hollandsfjord after we've made our way around the skerries. And this is what the skerries actually look like to make your way out. The pilot book, from what I remember, says any chance you get to sail inside the skerries, do it. Because you really are well protected from the southwesterly swells that might come up through. And we make our way into Hollandsfjord, which is down here, just in front of the Svartsen Glacier. We're coming through the fjords. It's really picturesque low-lying countryside, and then changes to quite stark mountains. And then alongside the jetty at Hollandsfjord, we've got Svartsen Glacier in the background. So Svartsen Glacier is the largest glacier in mainland Europe, but as we can see, it is still receding and getting a bit smaller, an inevitable fact of climate change. You will also notice that we are the only boat on the pontoon, which means we beat the cliff of 60. He's listening, I hope I don't get told off. So this is the Svartsen Glacier. As I say, it is the largest glacier in mainland Europe. And you can see from either side of the glacier where the glacial scouring has happened in the past, where the glacier has been larger. So to contrast the picture now, which is 2018, to 1890, pretty much the same angle. This one's a little bit closer, I feel, but we can see how the glacier in 1890 was virtually down to the water's edge and a lot fuller, which explains this sort of glacial scouring that is left over, and the fact that the glacier is now a couple of 100 meters up its old scour. The walk up to the glacier starts off along the edge of the fjord and then opens out into a beech forest and a birch forest where there's a youth camp, and you come up onto the glacial lake, which is fed from the glacial stream that we can see at the center here. And then here you really get an idea of how much the glacier has receded, because you can see it's virtually double each side of the glacier, which has gone and just receded over the centuries. You have two choices to get up to there. You can go on a path to the left, or you can go through the right in the forest and have a bit of a forest walk through the beach. And it really is a picturesque walk. You start getting closer and closer to the glacier. The tree line starts to thin out. Norway is also known as the land of lichen, and it has 2,000 of the 16,000 lichens that grow on the earth. So we've got a nice picture of cyanobacteria lichen there. So lichen is a symbiotic organism. So any that you see are blue have loads of cyanobacteria in them. Yeah, pretty spectacular bits. What is spectacular is the glacial scouring as you walk up. You've got the glacial stream just in front of us, the quartzite that's been melded in. And you've got a nice hanging valley in the back, which would have originally fed the glacier, but now feeds the stream. And it is really spectacular strata layers on the way up. Again, getting closer to the glacier, fighting our way up the old scree. And it's really polished and really, really smooth because of the pressure of the glacier, and it's just smoothed out over eons of geological time. In this photo, the boat is actually all the way down here, and you can just about see it. And this is the glacial lake that you've seen on the way up further. And this is right in front of the glacier. So we all go up and make sure we touch something that, unfortunately, probably for the next generations, it isn't going to be there. I mean, it doesn't really give an idea of size, but these are huge. This is half the size of a set of flats. It's 2 or 3 stories high. It is really, really massive, the edge of the glacial tongue. And there's a rather disheveled looking me. Glacial scouring and plucking is something really interesting, where the glacier plucks large bits of rock out of the underlying bedrock. And as it plucks these rocks out and sends them on its way, it leaves a hole. And then as the meltwater underneath the glacier runs across them, if you've ever been on a walk in the UK or in Scotland, you see them. Well, Scotland is the UK, but on a walk over there, and you see a very round looking hole in the rock, and you think, I wonder how that got there. Normally it's a pebble or a stone which has made its way into that depression and then just been pushed around clockwise or anti-clockwise in a little circle by the water flowing over the top of it. And then it just starts to make a big, big hole. This is about 6 foot long and about 4 foot wide. So it's probably originally been a pluck. And then as the meltwaters continuously run over the top of it over, again, eons of geological time, these little stones that are in the bottom have actually carved out a really smooth, quite round hole. Yeah, and that's huge. The forces that do this are unbelievably massive. From the Hollandsfjord, headed up to Fugeløy, which is here. Sailed up through the Skerries. The wind was from the southwest at the time, so it was a nice head sail. No point with the main. Just sail up on the head sail, nice and easy, jibing the head sail as we go, and getting the guys to navigate through the Skerries by traditional means. So yeah, it starts off a bit. These are the Skerries that we're navigating up through. So it does start off for the guys as a bit of a challenge. You know, most people now are used to navigating by looking at a triangle on a computing chart, and yeah, getting them to write down their pilotage plan and really, really plan the passage so that they actually get the chance to navigate a fairly good boat under sail by traditional means all the way up through the Skerries. So it was a really good sailing day, and the guys really loved it. This is our entrance to Fugeløy, and we were welcomed by a pod of pilot whales as we come here. And something I forgot to mention about, as we got to the coast of Norway, we're actually also welcomed there by a pod of killer whales. I've never seen killer whales, never seen orcas in the wild before. So again, that was pretty spectacular to see this huge pod of orcas, about 4 or 5 orcas, just swimming along next to the boat as we were coming in. This was a set of pilot whales, and again, they were pretty big for pilot whales. Here's Oriole, entrenched in the harbour at Fugaloya, and this is a shallow harbour. Again, it was really feeling our way in, and we only had about 15 or 20 centimetres below the keel at low tide on this harbour. As you can see, it's low tide. The angle of the gantry is pretty steep, but we got in no problem. It was a nice trip in. And Fugaloya is a really special little island. It was the first time we'd come across Norwegian salt fish, but it wasn't going to be the last. And yeah, the smell's pretty strong. The fishermen's houses are all also painted with pictures of fishermen in the famous Norwegian knitted jerseys. And this is a picture of the harbour looking back out towards the Norwegian mainland. The weather was spectacular with the trip. It really was good. I don't think we could have asked for better weather in May. And it really helped with the trip. Because we'd found a beach, we decided to have a nice beach barbecue. So the crew went off to find some wood so we could make a fire on the beach and yeah, enjoy it, cook on the beach. So the European guys going off to find wood. Normal wood-sized wood, not the Russians. The Russians find wood, half houses. She's a great lass, brilliant. So we set up a fire on the beach and we had our first beach barbecue on the trip. Yeah, it really went down well with the clients and they loved it. It was really a fantastic night. Obviously there's something wrong with this picture as the mate is sat down having a glass of wine and the skipper is cooking the dinner. But yeah, I give it to him, he's good. There's the guys eating the barbecue and a nice group photo after it. So a really interesting thing that happened, which I've certainly never seen and haven't seen since. The rainbow in the background started. Obviously the sun's behind me in the photo, otherwise I wouldn't see the rainbow. And it just started to get more and more intense as the hours went on and the sun dipped lower in the sky but moved further to the north. And it got more intense. And then all of a sudden it looked like that. With an iPhone on a quick panoramic view, and it was the final night of that trip before we made it to Buda, and it really topped off the trip for the guys. I think they loved it. Next day we went out to the windward side of the Fugaloy, which is the mountain we've seen quite a lot of, and honestly, if it wasn't for the fact it was about 4 degrees, you could have been in the Scilly Islands or southern England. Or the snow on the mountains in the background. Yeah, it was really spectacular. We did some scouting for Bob, so he can line up his next wild bunch set of climbs. And yeah, these are the skerries outlying out the back. And then we headed off to Buda, which was going to be the place where these group of clients leave and the group of clients for the next journey join us. It started off as a motoring trip, and then the weather got steadily worse. We eventually caught up with Blue Jay. We didn't know where they'd been for a few days. And of course, we had another race to get into Buda. These boats that you see quite often on the coast of Norway are from the fish farms. And you tend to find fish farms in most large bays of the islands. And yeah, the fish boats go between them and collect as they go. So yeah, the wind was getting up a bit. I think we're on about a force 5 or 6 here, but it doesn't look like it. The waves never look as big in photos. But as she's just under stay sail, it probably was pretty heavy. And then we arrive in Buda. So Norway remained neutral and maintained their neutrality through the First World War. So we thought it was pretty strange to find an anchor from 1918 from the US Navy. Again, we could find absolutely nothing out about it. But yeah, we thought it was a strange thing that the US Navy would have been in the First World War in Norway, especially as they had their neutrality. And And as all good journeys do, start and end in the pub. So this guy in the foreground, it's a bit of a blurry photo, but I thought it was good. And I think this tops off the week as well. It was an absolutely fantastic, well, 3 weeks actually, absolutely fantastic sail up with a really amazing group of people who, despite varying ages and various different life experiences, really bonded well as a team. And this guy in the foreground went off to Clipper to do a circumnavigation with the new Clipper boats. That unfortunately got cancelled with the COVID restrictions in, I believe, the Australia leg. So he made it all the way down to Australia. Hopefully, I don't know what arrangements will be made for them, but hopefully he finishes that circumnav. So on to the final stage, from Bodø to Tromsø via Lofoten. I hope I pronounced that right, because a lot of Norwegian friends we met were very, and as they should be, were very helpful with trying to make sure we pronounced it properly. And yeah, did laugh at our Scandinavian accents, but as I understand it, Lofoten was the correct pronunciation. When we were in Bodø, Bodø is a small, I mean, it's a city, but it's very small. So the best supermarket we could find to do our provisioning was essentially like a corner store. So like a Tesco Express or a Spar, or for the Americans who might be listening, a 7-Eleven. So provisioning 2 boats for a 2-week extended cruise requires a lot of shopping. And there is only one cashier at this this supermarket, or this small convenience store. So yes, a good train of 9 trolleys didn't go down particularly well. So we come back later in the evening to pay for all the stuff, so that the locals could manage to get through okay. Again, because we've changed crews, it's back into learning how to sail the boat, learning how the boat responds, safety features, exercises, man overboard, drills. So we conduct this across the Forth from Bodø up to Langegoda. And the anchorage at Langegoda, there's a few anchorages at Langegoda, but the one we picked was up the top of the, I mean, you could sail around, but why? Sail through and give the guys an experience of sailing up through a skerry, and this is their first experience of sailing up through a skerry and round into the anchorage. And the anchorage really was spectacular. This is the guys of the new trip. So a new crew, but the same boat. I just look more and more disheveled as the weeks go on. From Langegoda, we made our way across to Lofoten and made our way across to Reyna, which is a fairly substantial town for, you know, outlying islands like Lofoten. Luckily, the polar high was quite well established, and again, the weather for this trip was fantastic, if not potentially a little too light in places. But here we can see the wind from the north, which was a defining feature of the trip, light winds. If we imagine, or if we look at how this gulf is set up, in heavy winds from the southwest, this is really dangerous. The southwest just pushes in a huge swell and makes this quite dangerous for passage. But luckily, the wind's from the north, so we had a nice sail across. This is the entrance, or this is where the anchorage and harbour is in Reyna, and it is really stunning. Of course, more Norwegian salt cod. I can't even begin to describe how this smells, but it's pretty good. It doesn't taste so bad. This is a Google Earth view of Reyna and the surrounding area. So here is where the harbour and anchorage is. You come in round this bit here, and this huge fjord system at the back, we call it the hidden fjord. You can get into it. There are 2 bridges to get under to get in, but we were too tall. And there is some spectacular walks on these mountains here and these mountains here as well, which are nice and easy to get to. So you take a dinghy either under a little tiny bridge here or round through here, and then come up to This beach here we'll see in the next photos. And this is the other end of the hidden valley, as we called it. And there's the beach that you've seen in the other photo. A couple of us decided that we're a bit more intrepid on the hike and wanted to hike up to the top. So I went up with them and we had a really nice, treated to a really nice spectacular view at the top of Brainer. And this is looking back down into the fjords. This is a group that went up to the other end of the mountains, which are just behind the harbour that you can see just down to the right. And again, you can see the weather is absolutely fantastic. This is the pontoon you come onto in the Hidden Valley. And we met plenty of Norwegians along the way, and they were all so lovely and very, very helpful to us. Yeah, this is the on and off, and the facilities in Norway are fantastic and very, very cheap as well. All done on honesty system. Yeah, it's a really great experience if you have the opportunity to go. This is our boats moored alongside in the harbour in Rainer, and a couple of the guys who went on a canoe tour rather than go on a hike came back as their canoes. We went up to Nysfjord next, which is a old mining town and now a museum. But the next morning was a proper peace super, so we left it a bit longer to head up. And yeah, the harbour at Nysfjord is this old mining complex, which is now a museum. The wind blows pretty heavily in, and the best thing we found there was an advertisement for Codstock. So a 3-day music festival in Henningsvær. We had no idea it was on. I can guarantee that's where we went next. So we headed off across the fjord to Henningsvær. Henningsvær is this little offlying archipelago. And for anyone who's seen the climbing webinar the other week, you'd seen Henningsvær there. And anyone who has a Windows computer might recognize that view as one of their screensavers, because that is actually Henningsvær. Again, a stock photo that I've had to take because we didn't have a drone with us. But you moor either side, or you come alongside onto these walls. Sorry about that. Onto these walls of the harbour. And when we were here, it was 5 or 6 deep with boats, and it was full, really, really full. The weather was spectacular. The island is lovely. And you can see more cod drying racks here. More. And yeah, outlying skerries. But the best bit was Codstock, a 3-day music festival in the middle of Arctic Norway. Mental. You wake up every day to Elvis being played about 6 o'clock in the morning. It's really a surreal experience. From Henningsvær, we made our way up to Trollsfjord, which is one of the largest and deepest fjords in Norway, and then down to Lichtenvoll for an overnight anchorage. We did get a bit of wind that day, again from the north, so we set off on the port tack, and the guys really enjoyed a brisk sail. This is the entrance of Trollsfjord, and you can see in the background mountains gives you a scale of like how big the mountains are in the back. And there's one of the crew for this week, or this trip, in front of some of the waterfalls that are in Trollsfjord. Some more happy crew. And then this is the view back out of Trollsfjord. As we were leaving, I didn't manage to get a photo of it, but there was a Viking longship being sailed down the fjord that we were joining. And the reason I didn't get a photo of it is I was mildly concerned with a cruise ship that was coming in through this gap. So we had to squeeze out as a cruise ship squeezed in. And of course, we had no idea it was there because you can't see around the huge sides of the field. We met up with Blue Jay for a barbecue, and yeah, just a spectacular part of Norway. Because we stayed 3 days in Henningsvær at a music festival, that wasn't planned in the slightest. We had to make the next bit of the trip in pretty fast time. So this is a trip this is the line from Henningsvær all the way up to Helgøy before we progressed down towards Tromsø. And the reason we were traveling up to Helgøy was that it's at 70 degrees north. And although it is just a line on the map, the clients who go on the trip can then turn around and genuinely say, okay, I've sailed a boat, it's 70 degrees north. It's not summer and everyone's done. So the first trip was up to Fiskøya, as it's a sail training trip, We have the clients plan it, and the clients plan and run the trip as they see fit. We keep a close eye on it, but yeah, it really gives them a sense of independence to drive the boats themselves. You start to see the landscape changing as well as you progress north. The huge stark mountains start to become less and less, and you get more rolling hills and more greenery out of the harshness of the snow. But we are also progressing into June now. Again, from Fiscoya up to Finesse, you come into a huge open bay, which is a good chance for a nice panoramic. So a nice leisurely sail up there, which the crew enjoyed. The entrance into Finesse is sort of like an N shape back on yourself. And although the charts in Norway everywhere I found were very, very well charted, the idea that this was 17 meters to 6 meters to 9 and 11 leaves a bit to be believed. And of course, because we were in a boat that doesn't go backwards, we had to be pretty careful to decide at which point we either bail out or go for it. The reason we were coming into Finesse is we needed a bit of fuel, and there was a fuel pontoon at the southern end of this marina. But we just plunked ourselves on the first hammerhead. I wouldn't say we lost our bottle, but it was quite close. So that we plunked ourselves on the first hammerhead so we could warp the boat around the next day and just turn the boat on the warps to make it nice and easy to drive out. No point trying to reverse this boat. I'm absolutely adamant. It's a better sail of that meal than be able to find out how to drive this thing backwards. To save the walk, we decided to get the dinghy out and row over to the fuel pontoon to discharge and collect the fuel. And I think this is, again, testament to how nice and friendly the Norwegians are. The fuel station is unattended. It's a bit like an Asda fuel station if you're in the UK, where you put your card in and you get fuel out. Of course, our cards didn't work. And the only other boat in the harbour with anyone on it was a Norwegian family that were making their way up to Svalbard as well. And we just went over to them and explained the situation. And the guy was straight out with his credit card, paid for our fuel, took the cash from us. And yeah, you couldn't really ask for kinder, nicer people to do that for what is total strangers. We got our first hint of midnight sun that evening, and we decided to make sure we planned the passage to an island where we could see the midnight sun for the guys. Without further ado, the next day, the passage is planned by our clients. And also because we're in Norway and it's 24 hours light, you don't really have to worry too much about what time to set off and what time to arrive, because the tides aren't that big either. So if you notice at the clock at the left-hand side, it's actually midday. So we had a bit of a lie-in that morning because it had been a long motoring 2 days to get up to Finesse. And yeah, great. So we set off up to Lingoya for the next stage of the journey. Again, it was a motoring day because the polar high was quite far south. And yeah, that high pressure just created a really beautiful, warm day, but unfortunately not much wind for sailing. This is the little archipelago at Lingoya and Litje Someroy. Someroya, sorry. And again, we found a beach. So again, because we found a beach, we had a barbecue. I think the guys thought I was mad, barbecuing on the beach as often as possible. But I think it adds a nice dynamic to the trip. Rowed ashore rather than lob the dinghy engine on because it wasn't so far ashore. And then a nice empty deserted island just for us and our crew to again have a barbecue and yeah, a nice fire on the beach and cook on it. This is the island that we decided to do the midnight sun on. So we had a few hours to kill while the sun made it round to the north, and we had an explore of the island. And it just really is spectacular. There's Oriole back in the anchorage. I found a hammock, so I was pretty impressed with that. The offlying islands back towards the mainland. And I watched the seagulls here doing something really interesting. The seagulls would paddle along the shore at low water, see an enemy, turn it upside down, peck its insides out, and then leave the shell. Obviously, this one's been left for a while, so just leave the shell with the remnants of whatever it didn't want to eat left. So traveling around these islands, you just find loads and loads of old sea anemones. Again, another nice panoramic of the bay we were in with Oriole in there, and you can see there's no other boats around, just us. Beautiful scenery, it's fantastic. And then we had the nice midnight sun. So the client's got a really spectacular, clear view of the sun due north at midnight. And we left a little cairn to the barbecue. Coming into the final days of the trip, we headed up to another outlying island just to break up the journey to Helgoya. And coming up, again, the wind had picked up a bit more from the north. So we're again on the port tack, heading, well, this is really north-north-west the wind had come in from. So we headed up on the port tack, nice close reach. And yeah, a beautiful sailing day. Coming up towards the mainland again. And then essentially the islands you just use as shelter from the prevailing wind and waves. Nice calm anchorages behind them. Drop the hook, fine, and entrench yourself for the evening. The next day over to Helgoya through the last little bit of the northerlies, and you enter into Helgoya from the south. This is one half of the anchorage, and the other side of the spit you can see on the left with the lighthouse on is the other side of the anchorage. But because of the way the wind was blowing, we decided this was the best side. And then we went ashore into the little fisherman's harbour, absolutely immaculately kept, very, very well maintained, and very, very well protected. So south in this photo is the sort of top left side of the photo, sorry, the top right side of the photo. And then on the left-hand side, we're into the north. So it's really protected by the island. And again, you find some really picturesque sights on the walk around the island. The boat in the background with the mountains of Lingen. And then we all had a photo at 70 degrees north. The church here has something rather sad, but still amazing in it, in that it has two memorials to the Norwegian resistance fighters that lived on the island and fought the Nazis in the Second World War. The Nazis used the entire area and the outlying skerries to hide submarines to attack Allied shipping. And the resistance fighters fought on the islands and fought for independence of them. From speaking to the locals, the Germans were particularly cruel, and they tried to starve out the islands. So the resistance fighters tried their very best to overthrow it and stamp it out. But unfortunately, a lot of them were executed. And this is the memorials to them in the churchyard at Helgoya. Out the north side of Helgoya, it starts to change to very rustic scenery. And the bays are looking pretty spectacular. We even found some ice. So there were still the remnants of some ice that had floated down from further north. On the trip into Tromsø now, from Helgoya, we head south for the final day into Tromsø. And as we're coming past Lingen, these aren't my photos, these are some of the ones that are sent on our WhatsApp group. We see some pretty spectacular waterfalls and leftover remnants of winter. I definitely wouldn't go swimming up in Tromsø. It's very, very cold. Also, the water's full of these. And as we were having a final drink with the clients before they left, in walked a set of people I know from Antigua. And many of you have been to Antigua and know the Tot Club. In walked two members of the Tot Club. So we decided to have a furthest north tot after the clients had left in front of the Arctic Cathedral, or the Protestant Cathedral, as it is, in Tromsø. And this is the background here. And that is the most northerly cathedral in the world. So it was a bit strange to meet friends from Antigua in a very dislocated experience. So in summary, The trip length was around about 2,000 miles. We had the longest leg at 600 miles. It was 47 days in total with 22 sets of clients. We ended up with one new Yachtmaster Ocean from it. We ended up with one new comp crew, though I'm not sure if he'll ever sail again. We had one music festival and 3 beach barbecues. Are there any questions?
Mike, thank you very, very much indeed. And what's remarkable is you got paid for all of that. What a fantastic summer cruise.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I'm going to ask people to come in for questions, Mike.
Okay.
What came over is your actual passion for guiding people, for looking after people, for teaching people. Do you prefer to sail, cruise in the traditional OCC fashion, or do you prefer this kind of teaching expedition leader type role?
I think both, and it's really nice, and it's a really privileged position to be in a position like to do both. I'm a Yachtmaster Ocean instructor, and obviously a YMI as well. So a lot of my work is sail training. When I'm not running dive centres, a lot of my work is sail training. So it's nice to go on extended cruises on your own boat, but also have the opportunity to turn around and say, hey, it's time to get a bit of a grip on reality, go back and teach and be involved in helping people discover themselves and discover sailing, and really, really improve their sailing. Yeah, so it's nice to chop and change between the two. If I was to do back-to-back teaching roles over a protracted period, I think it starts to take its toll, and the quality of instruction you deliver starts to drop off. So about 2 months at a time is really the maximum you can manage. Then a couple of weeks off, maybe sailing the rowboat, and then back to it. So it's nice to chop and change between them.
Great, Mike. Thanks very much. I've got Charlotte Mason has got her hands up. Charlotte, I think you can open your microphone if you want to go ahead. Mike, just while Charlotte's getting her microphone sorted out, do you want to unshare your screen so that you go back to your tropical background and
stop share?
There we go.
There we go. There we go.
There we go.
No, there we go. Yeah.
Charlotte, can you hear me? Do you want to come in? Charlotte's still muted there, but we've got a few questions on the Q&A. I don't know if you can see those, Mike.
Is that on chat?
One from Greta Mitchell. In planning the trip to the Faroes and beyond, what was your planned average speed?
So the planned average speed was round about 8 knots. It's a 57-foot boat, so not so bad. And I mean, it was 600 miles in 3 days, so yeah, round about that speed for the trip from Faroes to Hollandsfjord. But yeah, again, because it's a 57-foot boat or a 60-foot boat when we were on the Clipper, they are speeds quicker than what we are used to sailing our own boats.
It was an impressive performance from the cruising boat from the Bowman 57.
It's all about the crew.
You fell into that trap. We've got a question from Lasek Wolnick, but I see he's got his hand up. So Lasek, your microphone is open. Please come in.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey Lasek, how are you?
Oh, that's lovely. Mike, how are you?
I'm not too bad. How are you?
Just been in raptures about your presentation because I just couldn't believe sort of how much I've shared of the trips. But the first thing I wanted to say was I think you're completely modest about what you actually did on that trip, because I was on Oriole year before last on a trip to Svalbard because my little boat's too small to go up there, so I actually joined Oriole to go up there, and I can't believe the work that you as skipper and the mate put in. I just don't know if everybody would understand, but it's actually 47 days of alternate 4-hour watches around the clock, as well as all the cooking and looking after folks. So, I mean, I just have my hat off to tenacity and stamina and seamanship.
Thank you.
You know, it's an amazing
Thank you.
thing.
Thank you very much.
I hope I'm not embarrassing you there, but I like when I was on the boat, I just looked at the skipper and I thought, how are you doing this? Because, you know, you'd have the long day. And I mean, you talked about maintenance, but my God, the amount of maintenance on Oriole was just extraordinary. And, you know, I laughed at this, the picture of the fuel filter, you know, of the Rackle filter, because I mean, I remember swishing that thing out myself. So it was, yeah, fun days on that boat.
Yeah, it's a really lovely cruising boat. I'm not an out and out racer. I prefer home comforts, and the cruising boat is just a bit softer.
Yeah.
You know, when you're on a Clipper 60, you're on a racing sled. You know, it's a racing sled. It's cot beds. No thanks. Give me a nice soft bed designed by Holman and Pye anytime.
No, you're dead right. You're dead right. And I just put up the little question there about the layers in the Faroes, and I hope you don't mind me just putting it up. Those layers are where there's 7 layers in all the islands, and it's where you had 7 individual eruptions. And what you had a fissure, and the fissure spouted out between kind of like 10 and 30 meters of lava. And what happened after that was the glaciation occurred, and it then scoured the channels between the islands. But the actual layers come from the eruptions.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Leszek. We've got a question from Mike Tattersall, I think it is. Mike
Tattersall.
Hello, Michael.
You all right, Mark? How you doing?
Just watching your adventures.
Hey, nice to hear from you. How are you?
I'm in the south of Portugal, actually.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. And thinking I should be elsewhere.
And you? Oh, it's nice to hear from you. I was thinking about you the other day.
I hope it was a pleasant dream, was it?
No.
So my question is, Mike, in the Faroes, because I've never been, I've met a few people from there. And they all seem to be great drinkers, but I don't know what they drink. What is their local drink in the Faroes?
Anything. Absolutely anything. There is 3 or 4 bars near the waterfront in Tórshavn. And when when the clients went out to do the Seabird tour at the cliffs, we'd finished the maintenance a bit early, so Alex and I went out and had a pint, and we thought, oh, we'll go to one of the quieter bars at the corner. But yeah, it's much like small village life when there isn't a great deal to do. Even by 6 o'clock, it was looking pretty ropey. People asleep at the bar, and
it probably reminded you of Port Stanley, the Falklands, because for many a time you thought you were in the Falklands during the trip and your commentary.
Yeah, I don't know why. Every time I've run through this presentation, I've said exactly the same, and I've forgotten the orcas and remembered it at each point in exactly the same place. But oh well.
Anyway, Mike, nice to see you. We'll catch up later, and I'll let somebody else come in and ask some questions.
I hope so, Mike. I look forward to seeing you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. We'll go to Brian Cudmore.
He's
Hi.
you're not there yet.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Mike. Yeah.
How are you?
Thank you very much. That was a really enjoyable talk, and it brought back a lot of happy memories for my wife and myself. We're based in Cork, and we were up there in 2005. We took a slightly different route to you. We went up the Irish Sea, through the Caledonian and up to the Orkneys, Faroe Isles, the Shetlands, and then across to Bergen. and from there up to the Lofotens. The one thing that really struck us was the glacier, how much it has really shrunk in the 15 years since we were there. It's absolutely frightening what's going on in the world nowadays.
Yeah, I think it's a sad testament to anthropogenic climate change. It's later on in the year I was sailing from Iceland back over to Norway, and they just officially lost, as they called it, lost a glacier. So yeah, times are certainly changing, and I think, well, as we've seen in the presentation the other day, yeah, anthropogenic climate change is certainly real.
Like yourself, we had many lovely days. We had days when we were just sailing in a pair of shores well north of the Arctic Circle, and we were swimming in the Trollfjorden.
Swimming.
Yeah. My wife was always dying to see the Northern Lights, and about 3 years ago we did a trip in the Hurtigruten from Trondheim up to Kirkenes and back to Tromsø, but no luck with the Northern Lights, unfortunately. Hurtigruten promised if you don't see the lights, they'll give you your money back, but we've yet to get a refund. So thanks again for your presentation. It's lovely.
Really lovely to hear from you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. We've got a question from John Gosling. John, do you want to open your microphone and come in? Or, the question.
Sorry, you didn't say it was in February.
From John asks, did you consider the Saltstraumen, the 22-knot tidal streams? That'd be a good bit of sail training for you, Mike.
So I'd say the philosophy I have with sail training is to try and keep the guys within what they're comfortable with. And although a 22-knot tidal stream is pretty spectacular, if it takes them outside a comfort zone and they're then pushed into a zone where they don't really learn because they're panicking too much about a 22-knot tidal stream, there's just not much point. It's a shame to miss it, but yeah, by the time we were up near the Saltstraumen, the guys that were on board weren't. The clients were very, very interested in the fact that we had one set of clients for the whiskey tour who had chosen to come on a whiskey tour. We have another set of clients that go on the large offshore leg who have chosen that very, very specifically because of the offshore sailing in it. And then a third set that choose the Lofoten cruise because of its smaller day hop nature. And yeah, it is like delivering three totally separate things and totally separate experiences for the different people.
Yeah, it's good that everybody got what they wanted. It's
I hope so.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And of course, the currents and tides in the in the Faroes are quite a challenge at times. Did you get much wind against tide up there?
I tried to avoid it.
Yeah.
I really, really tried to avoid it. The moon tides in the Faroes take a real bit of like getting your head round. And of course, the tidal book is in Faroese. So you've got to sort of figure out like, okay, well, did that happen now? Yes. No, it's turned now. So, okay. So although you've got the pictures to tell you what to do, it's all written in Faroese. And yeah, but I mean, you figured it out. But all of our wind while we were in the Faroes was from the north. So yeah, we coming into Klaksvik, we were against tide, but early enough that it's just after high tide, so we could get in before the tidal stream become heavy. Because of course, if we were going in with the tide, that would have been wind over tide. And then we left with the tide, and with a northerly. So we were fortunate, but then again, we weren't in really an extended cruise that most people would go to the Faroes for. Ours was just a 3-day stop to use it as a jumping point to get to Hollandsfjord.
A quick question on the Q&A from John Gordon. Did you have any problems checking into the Faroes or into Norway? And then we'll go to Martin Smith, who can open his microphone. So
Okay.
Checking in.
So checking into the Faroes is done at the local police station, and you sort of get to walk through the town and see the really picturesque town of Tórshavn, and it's on the south side of the town. And yeah, big modern glass building, no problem at all. Really, really helpful, nice people. And in Norway, I needed to only check an American into Norway. Was it American? Maybe an American I was checking. No, a Canadian. I was checking into Norway because, of course, Norway's Schengen. So once we'd been okayed in the Faroes, for a British boat, getting into Norway is no problem. But the Canadian needed to be checked in at the local police station in Buda. No problem at all. Absolutely fine. Again, really nice, helpful people. Waited while they did what they needed to do. Quick stamp, free. Right, brilliant, lovely people.
Great, thanks, Mike. Martin Smith.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for your talk. I was just wondering, with your experience of taking these big crews, quite a few people on board all the time, do you have a fairly sort of standard list for your provisioning? Because you make it sound very simple, but I'm sure there's a lot to think about, what you're going to buy and what the clients are going to want, and presumably if they're paying a bit more, sometimes they might want a bit sort of more luxurious provisions.
Yeah, so I tend to do it by setting out a meal plan that I think will work. We check no one's got dietaries, obviously. Setting out a meal plan that I think I'll be able to buy. So because we were leaving Scotland, and because it is a bit more of a high-end sailing scheme, we'll say, yeah, I forloaded it with booze in Scotland because I know I can buy it in Scotland. I know it's cheap. But of course, when we get to Norway, and well, we didn't reprovision in the Faroes, but when you get to Norway, reprovisioning alcohol would be very, very expensive. So we forload quite a lot of stuff. But yeah, just work to a meal plan. Set out a meal plan of what we think will work, what the clients will like. We do the provisioning sometimes with the clients, sometimes not. The trip to Norway, we provisioned both boats together with the clients, and that was hilarious. Take them to the big Tesco's in Oban with individual lists of you're to buy all of these fresh veg, blah blah blah, 70 onions, 40 parsnips, all the rest of it, and give them to each individual of the crew and set them off with the trolley. And then you can just hear, I don't think I'll ever forget one of the other crew like screaming across Tesco. It's like, Mike, they've only got 14 pounds of lemons. Well, just buy 14 pounds of lemons. We'll make the rest work. So yeah,
Mike, can I just butt in here, because I did do a round Britain commercial like yourself, and I turned back at the marina in Ireland to find the crew standing on the pontoon looking into the water, and there was a certain amount of groceries floating. And sorry, I'm not going to interrupt anymore, but I was just leaving you with this. And actually, one of them got a boat hook, and we fished up 12 bottles of wine from a bag. But in that marina, which I'm not going to reveal, there's still another 12 still down there, which if you go, you might be able to find them. So,
I mean, this is a provision run in Oban, coming back over to Carrera. The kegs aren't ours. I didn't have a bar on board, but yeah, you just provision up with all of the guys, lob it into crates and bring it back over. But yeah, definitely to a very regimented plan.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, and I know once I went shopping with some crew for a longer trip, and I thought I'd never do that again, because I ended up with bringing so much food home. I think I was eating it about a year later, things that we never actually ate on board. But thanks for your answer anyway. Thanks.
No problem. I might actually have. Oh dear, what have I done? That's a bad idea. You're still here?
A comment on the chat line about the Faroes mobile app called RAC. It's worth mentioning the tides and currents on your mobile. Free for any chosen time, date, really handy and easy to use. Once downloaded on the mobile, it does not need a network. I think that's a new feature. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
Let's see, I might be able to find. Hello. Dreamcatch, yeah. So it's just for the delivery I've done, and delivery food. Yeah, so in a very similar way for food. Let's see if this will load up. Yeah, there you go. It's like a provisioning list. So I don't know if you can all see that because you've gone off my screen, but
yeah, it's not shared at the moment, Mike.
Okay. Oh, never mind. We won't see that then. Yeah, so it's just a provisioning list, like day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. The meal, what it consists of per person, times by the amount of people.
You've got a confession from Matthew Thomas, who had the same experience with wine in a dock, apparently, which is now in 10 fathoms or something like that. And Geir Tor Christiansen says, we went early for provisions in Oban with a full shopping wagon and beer wine. We arrived, the cashiers only told us you can't buy alcohol in Scotland until 10 a.m. I actually wasn't aware of that.
Not something I've tried to do often.
Nick Owens, who lives just south of Oban, says, please let me know when you plan to go to Oban Tesco. I'll make sure to avoid it. Great talk. Nick, you can open your mic if you want to come in. Any of the panelists can control their mic, or anybody else who wants to ask a question, put your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That was a super talk. That was really fascinating, absolutely super. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, no, 10 o'clock in the morning is the earliest you can buy booze in Scotland. All beware of that, folks. Bit of little knowledge there for you.
I mean, you can't buy it till 10, but you can certainly drink it before.
Oh, of course, absolutely. Yes, if you've got it on board, that's right. Yeah, indeed. No, that was a really excellent talk indeed. Thank you very much. I was very interested to see that the Ocean Yachtmaster still requires the traditional navigational things. I mean, I did mine many years ago. With the old. With all of the sites and submitting your logbook and all the rest of it. And for some reason, I kind of assumed that the whole curriculum had moved on since I did it in the 80s or whenever it was, but clearly not.
I think the curriculum has moved on in the fact that the curriculum's changed with regard to how planning is done, how weather reports are gained, how access to information is brought. But if push comes to shove and your electronics fail on a small boat, which isn't unheard of, definitely isn't unheard of, the only way, well, not the only way, but yeah, certainly one of the best ways that you're going to find your required landfall is with a sextant and a decent clock.
Yes.
So yeah, it's still there. And it also satisfies, the RAA have to satisfy a certain requirement of the MCA. Because the Yachtmaster Ocean is commercially endorsable.
Yes.
So it does also satisfy the site requirements of that. But there is change to how it's examined now. You don't actually have to conduct your sites on your ocean passage. You can submit sites from another passage taken out of sight of land, and then having navigated an ocean passage by non-traditional means. So there is certainly leeway for it.
Right.
Yeah, I think it is dynamic enough that it is changing with the times. Okay. But for a small boat, yeah, it's.
Well, I mean, it's. I mean, that's good to hear. I must admit, I recall my final, sort of the final Viva. I don't know whether that still happens in the. Yep. I went to it, and it was an ex-RN commander or captain or whatever, and he said, "Now, young man," I'm going to test whether I'm going to allow my daughter to go sailing with you. That was his.
Lucky you.
Anyway, yeah, thanks. That's great. Super enjoyable evening. Thank you.
Cheers, Nick. Thank you very much.
Stephen Foote, Steve, you're very welcome to open your mic if you want, but he says, great talk, made us determined to come north, but slightly nervous about the temperatures. You need to reassure him. Good clothes, Mike, that's all you need.
Yeah, like, so
central heating.
one thing I forgot to mention in the talk is in between crew change in Carrera, I actually went to your house, didn't I?
You did.
So
you did.
I come down and had an evening with Sally and Simon, which was honestly really, really lovely to be welcomed, and thank you. And yeah, we had a chat about clothing and what a typhoon undersuit.
That's the one.
Pretty much.
Since your late one-piece suit can go anywhere.
It's a late one-piece suit, it's ideal. And honestly, the temperatures we experienced, well, you've seen from the photos, like there weren't many days which were terrible weather. Actually, it was quite nice and warm. And then when I came back to Norway from Iceland in the July, it was shorts and t-shirt weather. It really was fantastic. But yeah, early in the season, typhoon undersuits, heavy clothes. I'd certainly recommend something along the lines of I'm not being paid by them, but a Musto like HPX jacket along that sort of heaviness of Gore-Tex. Because when it comes down and it's cold. But yeah, a nice warm hat and your thin shillets, you'll be fine.
Mike, it was a brilliant talk and I really enjoyed it, but I'm sorry, I prefer the temperature where you are now. Maybe I'm just too soft.
Yeah, I'm coming back up north. This is too much a good living. I end up with a big belly here from too much rum and beer.
I thought your description of the first view of Faroes was very good. Most people's first view of the Faroes is just cloud fog. you were lucky.
Yeah, these massive black basalt cliffs and cloud.
Somebody was asking, can't remember who it was. Yes, Greta Mitchell wants to know about your new boat, Mike. What's your new boat and where are you going to collect it from? What are you going to do with it?
Okay, so the start of lockdown, I was in Grenada and I was captaining a 23-meter super yacht that I had to come back to Europe with. So I sailed that back nice and early, and by the time I got back to Europe, COVID had really settled in and boat prices had plummeted. So a Bruce Roberts 44 offshore came up in Trinidad. Trinidad was locked down at the time, but the price was really, really good. And I thought, this COVID thing won't last very long, it'll be fine. Oh, everything will open again in a minute. So I sent us to have a look at the boat. Reasonable survey, good price. Bought the boat. Trinidad never opened. So it's a steel Bruce Roberts 44, laid down in 86. And she's the aft cockpit catch version. And yeah, I've just been granted an exemption to go down to Trinidad next week. So I'll pick her up. She's still in the yard. So I'll sit out of quarantine down there, pick her up, do what jobs need to be done. And then I'll return back up to Carriacou, Grenada way. And then I think I'll be heading back north at some point. Probably, I don't think I'll make it this year. I think the timings will be far too tight. But certainly next year, heading back over and then heading back north. It's certainly an expedition style boat. And that's exactly why I bought it, a steel expedition style boat. And yeah, I don't know, cold ice. I think that's where I'll push the boundaries of sailing for the next years.
Good for you, Mike. George Ulrich says, does anybody know when Norway's going to open this year? I wish we did. I think Norway's got quite a big problem with COVID just at the moment. Their rates are rising quite steeply at the moment, but I think we'll all be guessing at that one. One last question, Mike, and then we'll let you go. Is that right? Shirley Williams says, great talk and a good advert for Rubicon 3. thought you were restrained with your advertising there, but I'm sure they do deserve credit. Having no boat of my own to sail these days, I went with Rubicon 3 across the Atlantic in the Ark. We won our class in Hummingbird, and then on from St. Lucia to Jamaica and down to Cuba. It's a very good experience from your boat owners. Yeah, great. There's other questions, Mike, but time's dragging on.
I'm good. It's up to you.
Does anybody else want to come in off the panel? And anybody on the panel can open their mics and speak directly to Mike. Tim managed to get under that bridge, didn't he, at Ryder in his boat, which was quite impressive. Nobody's coming in. Anybody else want to come in with their hands up?
Mike?
Yep.
Yeah, Mike, Gary.
Hi, Gary.
Tell me, what about the, did you have much condensation in the boats in the Faroes? Did you have, I know you've just bought a steel boat, and I was going to ask you about that. Have you got insulation in the steel boat if you intend going further north?
Yeah. So the steel boat's got spray foamed insulation, which we may even add to. Just when we get a good look at the side, but yeah, certainly insulation is a requirement. Admittedly, because Oriel was a fairly elderly lady, she didn't just, it wasn't just the condensation that made it wet inside. But I mean, there's a lot of wood and a lot of furnishings inside as well. So actually it was a fairly dry boat. It was fairly crisp. And the heater we had was a forced air heater, an Eberspacher. So it was, you could force dry air through the boat. So yeah, it was fairly dry. Of course, the guys are bringing in wet flattened suits to dry out inside, because there's nowhere else to dry them out. So certain areas were a bit damp, but so it certainly wasn't. It wasn't noticeable enough to be, and Buglan's the trip or anything. It was okay.
Yeah, that's okay. No, I'm thinking of heading up to the Faroes this summer for a wee jaunt, and I've a tin boat, a metal boat, but there's no insulation in it, so I'm just a bit concerned myself. But at least I'll be going up in the summertime anyway.
Certainly the guys that have been up there in steel boats. I've never been up there in a steel boat. I've only been up there in fiberglass, so I think they'd be better poised to answer that. But everything I hear of and read says insulation and my soft wood and soft furnishings. Soak it all up.
The sea temperatures in the Faroes, Norway, aren't actually so bad, Mike. They're still fed by the Gulf Stream. It's when you get further north and west into the Greenlandic waters that you
once you've got
a big issue.
Yeah, once you've got your Davis current coming down from the Arctic Sea, man, it's cold. It's cold.
I was just wondering, all this provisioning in Oban, where was the ties to the port officer?
You weren't the port officer then.
Okay, fair enough.
Anyway, I fronted up for enough Guinness.
So that's Bob offering a kind of click and collect service for anybody cruising to Oban this year.
The port officer likes Guinness.
Fantastic, Mike. Thank you very much. It's been
thank you very much.
A long evening. We're very, very jealous of your backdrop, and the noises off have moved away now, which is even better. But great talk, really interesting, and brought back lots of memories of the Faroes and Norway and the Scottish Glacier. I didn't recognise the walk that you took. It looked completely different to the one that we took in 2006 or 7 or whenever it was we were there. So that is a frightening rate of recession, I suspect. But lovely, Mike. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me to talk.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
you still got 100 odd people online, Mike, or 110 people.
Oh, wow.
You topped out at 260, which is pretty good, considering many of those are couples or whatever. So you've, yeah. So
we'll have to all get EastEnders on what.
I'll email you the Q&A, Mike, and if you want to get back to people, I'll send you the attendees list so that you've got everybody's email addresses if you want to contact them. And I will upload the video later on. Well, it'll go up overnight, so it should be live tomorrow.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting me to talk.
Fantastic evening. Particularly enjoyed the classic malts cruise around Scotland, because I hadn't realised you were going to talk so much about Scotland, which is a real bonus. Yeah, our home waters, fantastic. And see you when you're back in the UK. Oh, maybe in North America. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe see you this summer. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, we're all keeping our fingers crossed. Cheers, mate. Good night. Closing down.
Nice to see you all. Thanks very much.
Thanks, folks. Bye.
Bye.